Thank Senator Gilroy for his good wishes. They're much appreciated. Unfortunately, this bill is not appreciated actually in large parts of the Meady's constituency. Unlike the Fine Gael and Labour Party, have not changed my view on the property tax. And one was an outspoken voice during the last government that we shouldn't have a property tax because of its unfairness. And I'm glad that was reported in the media at the time, and I can remind people with my on-the-record comments on the issues. I didn't speak off the record on those issues. The property tax, in my view, is deeply unfair. It's unjust. It's deeply unfair, particularly in County Meath. When you go to towns like Dunboyne or Ratoath, which are in the top 13% nationwide on house prices, when you look at the property price register prices for last year, no account is taken whatever of mortgages or the commuting to work or the extra costs that these families have. And it's deeply unfair. Another issue in relation to the unfairness of this tax is the level of service that people get from local authorities. When someone sees a pothole road, having maybe paid the development levies that we spoke about in a rural area, and they don't see any prospect of that road getting fixed when they pay the property tax, they're not inclined to pay it. They're not inclined to want to pay it. They certainly want to comply with the law, as Fianna Fáil does. I want to be clear about that. We want to comply with the law. But you can see the frustration that people have when they see basic items left undone because of a lack of funding. When you go into housing estates, people are now expecting maybe their grass will be cut, or the residents' associations will get more help from the local authorities. That's not likely at all. This is the wrong tax at the wrong time. The IMF or nobody told you to bring this in, because you have renegotiated the IMF agreement on a number of occasions. And one of the greatest examples of renegotiation is the reduction in capital expenditure that you negotiated with the IMF. So you didn't want to spend the money on capital spending. You actually didn't want to spend the money on roads. The Minister for Transport boasted last year that 400 million was cut from the roads budget and nobody noticed. And that's a renegotiation that you did with the IMF, and that was your choice. Just as this property tax is the Fine Gael Labour government's choice. No one told you to include people with very high mortgages. No one told you to include people on social welfare for this property tax, and no one told you to be so blatantly unfair. In relation to one specific issue, which does impact on quite a number of households in South Meath in particular, is the whole issue of pyrite. And while I do absolutely welcome an exemption for those houses with pyritic heave, I do have questions maybe that the Minister could answer, because people are asking me these questions. The standard test for pyrite in a house costs usually in the low four figures, 2,000 to 3,000 euro, as I understand it, Minister. And I'm wondering, is that the type of test that's now going to be required for people to get an exemption? Because, of course, that would take the good out of the exemption. Another test is available, simply somebody to come in with a spirit level and just check the house, or on a basic visual inspection, you can see whether houses have in fact got pyrite in them and are suffering from pyrite damage. Another issue, Minister, is in relation to those housing estates where some houses have pyrite and others don't, but all of the houses are unsaleable. And that's a big issue, because I think that will be a difficulty going back to the revenue and saying, look, my value is zero. But if I want to buy a house in certain estates in South County Meath, you won't be able to get a mortgage for any house in the estate, regardless of whether there's pyrite damage in it or not, and that's a fact. And I hope that you're dealing with that, Minister, and I would like to know the answer, because I don't see it in the legislation, because this does tend to affect some houses and maybe not others, maybe depending on phases, but all houses get tarred with the one brush. And I do welcome some of the measures the government has announced in relation to damage for pyrite, but I would like to see it done quicker, and I've always been constructive in relation to my support for the government in relation to that. But these people, certainly, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. They want an answer. They're asking me for answers, and I'm sure they'll be asking other people in Meath East over the next few weeks for those answers. But fundamentally, this is a deeply unfair tax. It's going to hit people really, really hard. I don't think people realise the amount they're going to have to pay. They certainly realise the lack of services there. It's not fair. We're often blamed for abolishing the household rates in the 70s, but at the time they were very, very high, and they were a huge burden on families. And I will say one thing for Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin are running a no property tax campaign in Lifford, but in Strabane, which is essentially the same town, they've increased the local property tax by the highest rate in the north of Ireland. And I think there are questions that Sinn Féin will have to answer in relation to property tax. I personally have been always opposed to it, because I see the impact that it has in County Meath, particularly in the commuter belt, and I think this bill should be opposed. It's not true to say that we had a full debate on this. As one of my colleagues said, I disagree, I think it was Senator Quinn, that this was the day for amendments and we had a day for the property tax. We had guillotine debates rushed in before Christmas, and now this bill rushed in before a by-election, which I think is very deeply unfair of the people that were not getting the full time to debate these issues. It's been handed down on high while everybody is doing their work preparing for it and the legislation not even passed. Gormallaght.